or on this computer. So Dr. Yunkaporta, thank you. I really appreciate your talking with me on the other side of the planet. And it's thrilling to me that we can do that. No money. No, we just turn on a computer and other side of the planet, we're chatting.
Yeah, it's insane. It's Buck Rogers. Like anyone's old enough to have grown up with that.
Okay.
Flash Gordon kind of stuff.
Where and when were you born?
Melbourne in 1972, but moved to Queensland straight away.
And what month?
So,
I'm interested in your astrological sign.
It was 3rd of September.
So it's Virgo.
Yeah.
Earth sign. Gentle, caring, compassionate.
Yeah, just not.
Virgo.
Very atypical. Virgo. I'm not fussy at all.
You're not detail
about anything. Yeah. I'm just kind of big picture, and I'm either grandiose or just like lying on the floor crying, and only one of those two things.
There's a lot to cry about in the news, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you were growing up, what did your family teach you about what's right and what's wrong? And is there God and heaven and hell and whatever? What did your parents teach you?
I grew up in construction camps. With people different from my family today, and I don't know, it was really different. It was pretty much all just violence, and Nietzsche, tough as survival of the fittest. Hit the big guy first. I mostly was just taught, how to fight and how to take a beating, and I was lucky enough to have old people around as well who showed me, how to read the land, how to do tracking, not just from footprints, but from all the signs all around and all the signals from the landscape. What's flowering, where the wind is, sun, everything like that. So I did learn how to read context and think contextually. That way, I was lucky to have a couple of old people around who still knew that stuff.
Yeah. Did your parents think Indigenous, identify as Indigenous, or share that with you?
Yeah. I can't talk about them. Yeah.
Okay.
From there. Yeah.
Well, did you? So it sounds like you didn't go to church on Sunday.
I think I went to Sunday school for a few weeks, but they were putting on a musical called Oliver, and it was just going through all the commandments, and I think I got theft or something. Yeah, I got thou shalt not steal, and I was like, I don't know, they sent a note saying that I should get clothes to dress up like an American Negro. So I was the Negro character.
The theft
I
was
quite when I was a kid, I was a lot darker than I am now. From the sun. So I was the brown one, so I got to be the American Negro, and then
and that was representation for theft.
Yeah, as soon as my carers found out about that, they went no, and they pulled me out of Sunday school.
Great. So
yeah.
What?
Which, I mean, that would have been my first solo, publicly. Which is a shame I didn't get to do it. But it also would have been like cancelable. Yeah. Then I remember what the good Lord say, tell the truth. I'm supposed to do that. And I was like just watching Fat Albert, that Bill Cosby cartoon back in the day. That was like all I knew about American.
I don't even know about it.
African Americans there. you know, and so I was just copying off that, and I'm really glad that I didn't do it
Oh,
in
right.
public.
So
Imagine that.
did you go to high school regularly
Um,
if you
yeah,
were moving around?
yeah, yep. Like I went to, anyway, it's certainly more than a dozen, but I'm not sure. I've kind of lost count. There's like more than a dozen schools, but they're all remote and rural. Um, schools, sort of rough frontier, barefoot schools kind of thing. Um, yeah, and I don't know. I didn't have a good time at school. I don't really like thinking about school very
Right.
much. But then I
Well,
got stuck in education forever because I ended up doing an education degree because I didn't have a good enough score to do anything else. If you score really low in Australia, then
in the college
that's
entrance exams?
yeah, that's the course that you get into is teaching, which
Oh,
that feels upside down to me. But anyway,
absolutely. Well, what was the impetus to go to college?
someone said that I couldn't
I love it.
teacher, and that's pretty much my whole life is just motivated by like revenge and opposition, which is what you learn when you grow up with that toxic masculinity, that sort of battle, you know, defeat opponents ethos. And you're watching um yeah, a couple of films, Conan the Barbarian had a very big influence on me,
Wow.
and Once Were Warriors later. Yeah. Um
But
uh
the warrior part of masculinity can be noble and courageous and help the downtrodden and the poor. So it and honor and trust. So it can have some positive value.
only when it's collective. Only when it's a collective ethos. And it's almost the same with everything. When it becomes individualized, it becomes poison. So if you are individually, trying to be, the best and the fittest and the only, then that wrecks everything. And that's that misreading of Darwin, back in the day, that survival of the fittest, when he was talking about the survival of the fittest communities, and I guess if you are a warrior community that works in that way, but not in an expansionist way, to grow, to, take other people's lands. But, if you're a warrior community that has stable sovereignty and just maintains that, then yeah, collectively, warrior ethos can be good, but not for individuals. So I don't really go in for astrology very much, you know,
Mhm.
because time and place are far more fluid and complex than that. And also it sort of isolates individuals as, oh, this is your special thing. You're moving in the world in this way. But sure, well, we don't do that. In our Aboriginal communities, we don't move around in groups. Sorry, we don't move around as individuals. We're always groups. You're never alone. And so everyone's moving together and doing the same thing. So how are you going to be moving differently because of where some stars were when you were born? That's relevant in women's business for determining,
Ability.
periods of time between pregnancies and stuff like that. And also there can be a totemic link, potentially to some star and story, and therefore, the animals that come with that seasonally, and you'll have a certain orientation around the seasons that way. But apart from that, it's not like, oh, you're this kind of person because you were born under that lucky star or whatever. It's yeah,
Well, I will say that the stars move through your life, so it's not static. It
yeah,
is
yeah,
constantly in motion, and to me, it's a blueprint. It's a suggestion. It's here are your strengths, here are your weaknesses. Here's what your spirit wanted to work on in this lifetime. Here's
yeah,
where you're going to have challenges. So to me, it's kind of a thought-provoking,
mm,
useful guide, and it
yeah.
is
I
for
think that's more that more works around our matrilineal or matriarchal cultures.
mm,
Um, because yeah, that's I mean, in some ways they're more static and defensive and continuous. the matrilineal cultures, like they don't tend to mix with outsiders as much. They don't tend to do much adoption from outside. You know, they sort of try and maintain core bloodlines more and all that sort of thing. But patrilineal cultures, like the one I come from, it's a bit different. It's a lot more open like that. But then also it's static and rigid in that you inherit your father's totems. You know, so it doesn't matter when you're born or who you are, that you inherit that way. Yeah.
So if my father's totem is the heron,
Yeah.
then that's the heron is my clan protector as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Yeah. But you'll come with a different bush name from your brothers and like a different seasonal orientation just from being female, you know? Yeah.
But we don't, as far as I know, there are no matriarchal cultures. Do you know of any? There were like Crete and the book by David Graeber where he talks about the egalitarian societies in what's now Ukraine and elsewhere. I think Paleolithic. They were more egalitarian. They didn't fight. They had goddess worship. They shared. But I don't know of any matriarchal societies. Do you?
Well, in the south of Australia, a lot of the mainland Aboriginal cultures were matrilineal. You know, or
That's
even
different than matriarchal.
um, yeah, yeah. But if it's matrilineal, then it sort of the whole society is more set up around women's business, and so there's sort of there's more authority of that. Um,
More respect.
yeah, more front and center that one. Um, you know, but with the patrilineal ones, it kind of I don't know, it kind of evens out, but you'll find that a lot of the flashy roles of the front and center sort of stuff and public ceremonies, a lot of that men will be men will be sort of featured more. Yeah. It's weird, but I mean, in our way, the patrilineal societies are more egalitarian. I don't know, just from my point of view.
You mean because men are
But they're
the
they're all they're
master,
all quite they're all quite egalitarian though.
the
Yeah.
Aboriginal cultures?
Yeah, because there's sort of that absolute assertion of individual sovereignty, but also balanced with a completely entangling set of relations and relational sovereignties. So it sort of comes out like ripples, from that self, that law for yourself that you have to follow of your norms and responsibilities and your morality. There's that law to govern yourself, to maintain your individual sovereignty. But yeah, then there's that, those next layers out of a family and extended family, and then clan, and then tribe, and then regional collectives of tribes, who will all share sort of one name. That's usually the word for person there, and then it goes out then further and further until it's, all the way out to continental common law, um, which is like sunrise, sunset dreaming. That's where you travel out for, big ceremonies. You might go thousands of kilometers for that, periodically, like every 3 years or 7 years or, 23 years, all these different cycles where you might travel a long way for big ceremonies and that law is maintained. You also leave your language and law and culture to be kept by people from other tribes,
What do you
and
mean
that
leave?
makes well, you in every tribe there are people who are trained up to speak the language and hold the sacred law of other cultures. Um, and that's kind of like for a start that prevents imperialism. Um, because everybody is holding the sacred law of other people. You can't have invasion, so it makes an interdependence. It also protects against cataclysms. So a culture will be able to continue, in its bioregion, uh, after there is a volcano, earthquake, storm, red tide, some cataclysmic event. If that becomes depopulated, it can become repopulated with people who can make sure that that language and culture endures in that place. And so in that way, everyone's interdependent, and that's why you see in Australia and New Guinea the sort of densest diversity of languages and cultures. Particularly in New Guinea, on the planet, so many cultures crammed into a very small space. It's like a patchwork quilt of different cultures and aligned to territories and bioregions.
So are
Yeah,
you
so that
saying that the clan, each one would have like a historian, anthropologist, diplomat, ambassador combined in one
yeah,
who
yeah,
my job is to know what the other clan believes and follows
yeah.
and to make sure it's preserved, but to understand it
Embassy,
so I can get along with them.
yeah, embassy's a good word. And I mean, like I should have done from the start, like so I'm here on Bunurong country in Melbourne. Um, Yeah, and there are lots of orangs, like Woiwurrung, Tongarang, all those ones, going out through all this Koori groups, going all the way through Victoria, which is the state in the southeast here. Yeah, so there's and they're known collectively as the Kulin nations. So you can see that those individual sovereignties. So there's Bunurong and Bunurong and all these different different kind little groups and bands here, and a lot of different languages, two different language groups just in Melbourne alone, at least. And then they go out in different dialect groups and different clan groups,
Does that
different
mean
tribes going all the way out. Yeah,
because I'm in a collective, people are watching me, so they can be supporting me and making sure I don't go out of bounds?
nothing is secret.
Mm,
Anybody going off on their own is always assumed to be doing evil.
mm.
Yeah. So yeah, that you're never ever alone in our culture.
You say that the worst, I don't know if you use the word sin, but the evil, the problem in the world is narcissism. And
Mm,
narcissism is feeling I'm more important than you or someone else. So you're
yeah,
saying Aboriginal people don't suffer from that because they're raised since they're little, we're a community.
yeah,
What
yeah. It's I mean, it exists and it pops up, but we have most of our dreaming stories, which carry our lore. These are mostly about people who go the wrong way. They either go off on their own or they start to believe that they're exceptional, or they're even animals or entities or spirits that grow too big for their own good, and must therefore be broken down, hunted, cut into many pieces, and turned into many diverse smaller species kind of thing. And I think a lot of this comes from that period, 13,000, 10,000 years ago, uh, of climate change when the sea levels rose, when there was that thaw, when the ice age ended, in the north. There was that thaw and the sea levels rose and the continent of Australia dried out. So a lot of the megafauna could no longer be supported, and sort of, I don't know, there's always a debate around whether Aboriginal people wiped out the megafauna or whether climate change got them. I like to think it's a bit of both. Just
How could they
from,
wipe it out? Because I mean, the whole
yeah,
stereotype is that Indigenous
exactly.
people don't wipe out culture.
Yeah,
They live with
exactly.
it.
So that this is often deployed by the right, who are looking for what they call the smoking gun. Of they're trying to find diprotodon fossils, fossilized bones with flint knife cuts on them, because if they find that, that'll prove that the Aborigines ate all the megafauna. I don't know how that proves that. That's a big leap to me. But I mean, just from our stories, it seems as though when the Great Change happened, it seems to me as though the land could no longer support these giant things. And I don't know, you could wait a few centuries for them all to die out as they, you know, basically predated the landscape, eating more than there was available, and things could all turn into desert. Um, or you could just wipe those things out. There are a lot of stories about hero ancestors who tracked giant creatures and entities and hunted them and killed them and cut them down to, like I said before, more diverse species and more manageable size of animals. So I imagine that's the way. And I keep thinking about this next period of climate change when we'll dry out even more. And I'm imagining more mammalian dwarfism occurring on the continent. And I'm
Mm.
imagining how that will change our weapons too. So I mess around at the moment while I think about that. I'm playing around with making really small uh, small weapons, which
Ah,
is
that's
helping me to think
beautiful.
about that. Because that's how I do my work, when I'm doing my thought experiments and composing, research and writing. I like always make carvings for these things and then sit with the carvings and write from those. Even this weird thing here, but lots of little, yeah, lots of little
It's
stuff.
like a bud,
Oh, this is just a carving tool. So I
but it
use
looks
this
like a
to like,
bud itself.
does it look like a bud?
Yeah,
And no, that's like
absolutely.
a shark tooth there, just attached to a wallaby bone. And I can
Or
scratch,
duckbill.
yeah, I scratch designs into the wood with that. So I got all these little things. Yeah.
Ah, you're
Making
getting
That's how
ready
I'm
to
working
expand
through that idea of, yeah, well, I wonder where it'll go next, with it when we dry out even more.
and get hotter. Yeah, right. Well, I guess they go
Mm,
together. Well,
mm.
you were adopted by the Apalech clan, which is not your birth clan. What journey led you to them and they to you?
Yeah, just a sort of orphaned and what we call lost mob. Lost mob is when you become, separated, for too long from your,
Group.
your tribe of origin. Um, and I know there's no easy way back, or you're too old to go back, or, et cetera, et cetera. So, adoption law, particularly in patrilineal groups, is sort of, real paramount law. It's part of the way of fostering those interdependencies and embassies. So like our first big native title case in Australia was the Mabo one that is sort of famous all around the world, that one. But Eddie Mabo, like, he wasn't born a Mabo, he was adopted Mabo. And so you know uh that held up the case for a while because they had to look into all those customary laws around adoption, as to whether or not he had claim to that. And yeah, that did go through. So that's law that's recognized even, in the colonial law here. Um,
So how
yeah,
did you
that
find the Appalachian? How did they find you? How do you
um,
pronounce it? I'm sure I'm not pronouncing it
yeah,
right.
yeah, Apalech. Yeah, well, that was I was, like I said, I grew up in Queensland, so I moved around, and I mean, I lived with lots of different groups, lots of different, you know, uh, what you call different nations, lands, and learned a lot through that, and then finished up. Yeah, I finished up on Cape York, and and that's where I was there in my 20s, and I kind of got grown up there, and because I was lost mob, and orphan status kind of thing. Then I got, I was taken into family, and that was, I don't know, that was through some really hard stuff. I won't go into details, but like, a boy who was born at the same time as me committed suicide, and then his parents intervened in my own suicide attempt, and out of that, I came in as the youngest there, as my good brother there was, Ted Murray. Yeah. Um, yeah, and then that was it. And sort of under that law, I was like, well, that's finished now. All those, any previous ties, bloodlines, things like that, finished, and then so can just only be this. and,
Mm,
have to, yeah, undertake like name change, pretty much everything, like really hard stuff to go through over a number of years, um, until, I sort of transmogrify down to my cells,
mm.
so until I have that same smell. I had to have the same smell as everyone else, and otherwise the dogs will bite you. You know, yeah, the day when it's completely finished because you can walk around and the
Pay
dogs don't
attention.
bite you. Yeah, dogs don't bark at you. Mm.
In Sam Talk, you say that you didn't have initiation into the tribe. Why not?
No, 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 no initiation into manhood, and that's yeah, and I explained that in there that that doesn't happen anymore in our place because there was a swimming pool built on the initiation ground. So that finished then.
Wow.
That was a public health measure.
Really?
Because there were statistics that places with a swimming pool had less scabies and other things.
So there's a difference between initiation into male adulthood and just
Mm.
initiation into the tribal lore.
Yeah, yeah, and there's lots of different initiations.
Ah, I didn't know that.
Women's business, men's business, and can be like every 10 or 15 years too. There's higher levels you keep going through, because the really sacred law is kept by the older people. The older you get, so there's lots of different rites of passage that keep going, lots of different ceremony.
And you've been
Uh,
able to do that through the years to advance.
um, yeah, not very much, no. Yeah, like as I say in Sand Talk, I'm like a 50-year-old boy in my culture, So, but I'm quite satisfied with that kind of, I don't know, what we've seen in the West as low status. Um, People don't seek that progression and that higher status because, while there's authority that comes with it, there's no power that goes with it. So, there's nothing really there to desire. There's only obligation.
What about knowledge? I mean,
There's not much advantage. Yeah, you gain knowledge, and with that you gain respect. But at the same time, everybody has a baseline, right to respect and and love, and everybody knows something, better than everyone else. Everybody
mm,
does,
mm.
and then you're respected for that. And depending on who, I mean, so you could be traveling, and as you move from the savannah into the mangroves, the authority of the group will have to shift to a different family, and maybe there's just a 12-year-old boy there, um, from that other family who owns the mangroves, So all of us, that 12-year-old boy has authority as you go through, and he's the ones who will call out for the old people there to make sure everyone's safe and put his smell on the others, so that they carry that smell for the duration of their time there, etc., etc. So everybody has sacred law. Um, Everybody has common law, across the whole thing. But then you also, you speak for your family's law, whoever the most senior person is there, uh, in that family in that time. But usually the eldest sibling is the one who speaks for everybody else. Yeah.
So if we're deciding we want to go this way or that way or engage with these people or not, are the elders the ones who are looked up to decide?
Yeah, yeah, or the eldest there, unless it's a silly person, because sometimes, in a lot of places down south here, as soon as somebody reaches a certain age and weight, they're referred to as an elder. But it's different. It's different for my mob. It's like you can have a really old man who's just regarded as a boy. Same as me, and so it's not necessarily the age. Um, I don't know. So let's say like a really old and knowledgeable song man. you know, who speaks like 13 different languages and knows all the songs and dances for everybody. They pass that knowledge on to their, you know, teenage son, and then the old fella dies when he's 20, then you end up with a 20-year-old songman who speaks for everybody in that way. You know, so I mean, we don't really have the word elder in our way. Yeah, it's not like that. We might say matine. Matine's like I mean um like a um uh it's hard to translate, but it's a authority, cultural authority.
Like someone who has knowledge that's respected.
Yeah, somebody who
Respected.
speaks for culture and place, and you know, that kind of thing.
You say that there's women's business and men's business, and like women would more likely do fiber arts and men to do carving or whatever.
Mm,
Are they equally respected? Because I know in some Native American tribes, if women do basket weaving, that's not as respected
mm.
as what the men do.
Well, it's a lot of that is about what's valued by the dominant culture in the marketplace too. So
Mm,
that twists things a little bit,
a lot.
you know, so it depends on what the trends in the marketplace are. So, and that can change hands often, you know.
I just
And
heard
you
on the
see
news.
a lot in a lot of mobs now, you can see, and this has come into our culture recently too, the carvings of the men that are you know, it might be $10,000 a piece, whereas the women's weaving isn't. The women have started weaving sculptures, you know, of animals and entities,
Brilliant.
and those have ended up surpassing the carvings of the men. You know, so things evolve. You know, we're all in an economy here, and our cultures are always affected by economies. You know, men's women men's business, women's business are separate. Usually, women are at the cutting edge of innovation because of the faster evolutionary cycle, because the things they make are more disposable and break down faster through use, like string bags, weaving, you know, all these kinds of things, because women's technology needs to be constantly in motion.
Ah,
Um,
that's interesting.
Usually they're at the forefront of innovation because their evolutionary cycle is shorter and therefore faster. You know, so you get you know, any basket you look at, you know that's coming from that woman, a particular woman. You can identify it because individual styles develop and then they influence each other, and yeah, and there's it's referred to as clever hands.
In
uh,
in the book, what a point that I'm making is that around the world, the main religious problem, according to the religions, is secularization. People don't go to church, temple, mosque,
mm,
whatever. And so I'm trying to figure out why. And Carl Jung said Western culture is barren and sterile because it so focuses on the logos principle and denigrates, fears, whatever the eros principle. So I'm wondering if indigenous cultures do a better job of balancing eros and logos, valuing the feminine, not being afraid of it, valuing virginity over all else for Mother Mary, for example.
mm. Yeah, no, that's not a particularly important thing. um You know, it's interesting. I'm part of a research group right now, and we're looking at Australian spirituality. You know, all of the previous findings that we've had from earlier studies done by this group, we just found that there are fewer people in Australia who are you know, in organized religions, or, and they might be categorized as that, but they never go, and who identify more as spiritual, you know, and that could be New Age, but it could also just be, a sense of, that there are ancestors, there are ghosts, there are energies, most people who subscribe to any kind of wellness or alternative medicine will have that sense of, mind over matter, and that, if your spirit's clear, then everything else is too, etc. you know um the horoscopes we're looking at earlier,
Well,
but the main, it's weird because these are kind of secular spiritualities. And what always comes with secularism is a kind of cultural pastiche. You tend to get a melting pot
blah,
because everybody's running around like little bowerbirds, just picking up little bits and pieces of everybody's culture, and
interesting. So
you
it
end up with a
becomes vague.
pastiche. Yeah, yeah. So,
Mm.
but with more, things that are more monocultural religious, you don't get pastiche, you get monocultures. But places like Australia where it's really diverse, and where the land is directing people, through the law of the land, our old law, it sort of drives people towards embassy and diversity. And, so we finish up with this sort of land-based spirituality in Australia. Like, all people end up moving towards this, whether you're Muslim or Buddhist or anything else. That there's this idea of nature and all that, but it's more than that. People end up centering around space and being driven by the energies of particular places and the entities of that place, even to the point where you'll find a boys' school just coincidentally happens to be built near a boys' initiation site, and a
Mm.
girls' school across the river will be built on a girls' traditional site. And
Mm.
the colonists had no idea they were doing that, but they were kind of uh,
Feeling it, the
yeah,
magnetic.
driven by the energies of the place to select the sites in that way. Um, yeah, this
Wait, does the
yeah.
group tend to think that they call it SBRN, spiritual but not religious? Are they saying that's inevitable, it's fine, it's evolutionary, or are they saying that's a bad thing because it's just pastiche?
Well, I mean, they think that's a good thing because there's that, melting pot sort of thing. I don't know, a lot of us would see that more as a similarity, and that, secular pastiche is kind of, erodes culture as much as anything else. Um, yeah, we more. Here's the thing. I mentioned it earlier. This concept of maintaining individual sovereignty, family sovereignty, group sovereignty, and you set those things first before you go out into embassy with others. And you do share and you do adopt each other's ways carefully, but this is something that's done over time and with care. Pastiche is something that happens randomly. It's just throwing a whole heap of different things into a solution and shaking it up, and the particles go where they may, and the chemical reactions happen as they may. Sometimes that ends up being a peppermint in a can of Coke, and it explodes everywhere. And sometimes it all settles to the bottom like mud. You never know what you're going to get. Uh, See, it's a colonial thing, an imperial thing. So, the mother country remains a monocultural place under one god. It remains non-secular, but at the same time, secularism is demanded of the colony. So, you know, um, your non-secular mother country that takes over another people's lands kind of projects a secularism onto the governance
Well,
of that
when
place.
I think of imperial power, I think of them Christianizing the natives, enforcing the
Yeah.
priests, enforcing Catholicism on the boarding
Well,
school.
that's another dichotomy because, yeah, religion's imposed on the natives, but the colonists who are governing the place, yeah, that usually is something that becomes secular.
Ah,
So
so
the
like
secular
England is
secular
Church
governance,
Church
there's
of England
yeah,
Episcopal, but in the colonies,
separation of church and state in the colonies is quite strong. So you see that in the US, but in England it's a bit different. There is a lot
it's a
more overlap. Yeah,
state religion.
yeah. Although Britons would argue against that. These are just musings, I guess. Uh,
Well, it's called the Church of England,
mm,
Episcopal Church. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, so what are you teaching your kids about the meaning of life and how to be a good person and live in community?
Just everything we can, from the culture. Um, and those most basic ways that you do as a child. You know, and a lot of that is just letting the lessons happen themselves. You know, just the attitude towards frogs, that kind of delicious fear that you have of them, and that's funny. And you know, but basically everything, and this is, I teach everybody this way when talking about reading country, everything starts with the ants. You know, you watch the ants and you learn how to read them, and you learn how to interpret their signals, um, you know, responsively, and you know, the same every time. So you know, you can do that, and you can make accurate predictions from the behavior of the ants. When you start to get into that rhythm with them, then you start to align with country. Then you start to understand, you know, not only with what the weather's doing, but what it's signaling, what it means. You know, you learn everything from the ants. Ants are the things that I don't know. See, larger animals can shape waterways, but ants maintain waterways where they are.
Hmm.
You know, things. I don't know. So where you are, wolves, the activities of wolves can change the course of a river because
Definitely
they're
beavers.
directing the herds. You know, here and there, and then yeah, the beavers are doing their thing. Um, yeah, these are all really important things. The bears, their habits with what they do with the salmon, um, give the trees the things that they need. If they're not dragging the salmon off and eating them in the forest,
Mm,
then eventually those trees will die and the river will change its course.
mm,
If they just change their feeding habits, or the salmon change, where they're going and where they're congregating, all these things are responsive. But
mm,
your ants are a constant, you
mm.
know,
And
and
for your
yeah.
family now, you're learning from the bees.
Yeah. Yeah. So my spouse is out there in a bee suit right now, managing a beehive. See, we're down south. She's a Barda woman from central Queensland, and I'm north of that. So we're used to tiny little native black bees. But we're down in Victoria now where it's too cold for the little native bees to be. So she's got custodianship of a box full of Italian bees right now.
That's great.
Yeah,
Will the kids be able to have initiation into adulthood ceremonies? Will there, is there
they
people to teach
they
them?
will through. Yeah, the Barda mob doesn't do that anymore, and my mob doesn't do that anymore. But because of that embassy and because of that continental common law, sunrise, sunset, dreaming, you can go through, what a lot of people call Bora. You can go through that Bora anywhere. Like my dad says, Bora is Bora. You can go through ceremony, you know, um, yeah, with any mob that wants to put you through. So I could do that in Western Australia. I've got an invitation to do that there, although I haven't been back there for many years. And also down south. I was supposed to go through a few years back, but COVID hit, and so we couldn't travel. And then it was disruptions, and now I've got young neurodivergent kids, and I can't really leave them for 2 weeks to go through ceremony, and then
Uh,
come back
For
covered in cuts and scars and needing to rest. Yeah.
Native American initiation, it usually involves a vision quest, being by
Mm,
yourself in the wilderness, getting a vision to inspire your new name,
yeah.
your life. It could involve the hardship, like
Yeah.
uh, the Sundance thing. Is that a
Yeah.
similar kind of?
It's interesting. There's more of an emphasis on the individual journey. I found on Turtle Island. Uh, both with Native. There's a lot we have in common. Native Canadian and Native American. And further south, there's a lot we have in common. But then there's some things that are departures common, because most of our things are group. Um, so you go through in a group of young men, and you're all terrified together, and you're all experiencing the same, what you might call vision, so knowledge. You're experiencing the same thing. Whereas in the Native American way, there's a lot more, you have that cohesion as well, but there's a lot more focus on the individual experience than what we have here. Everything here is collective. Yeah, so we don't really have that. Nobody gets their own special special quest or anything like that. You just have obligations and duties that are tied to your places and your titles, and but you usually hold those with other siblings as well. It's seldom your own thing, which makes sense because if you have your own quest, then bang, you're finished. So in Sandtalk, old man Juma, he gave me lots of things that I had to do down here. And in the next book I'm talking about, I'm lamenting that I won't be able to do those. I won't be able to meet all those obligations here. And then a senior man's telling me, no, that's all right. If you don't worry about it, if you don't do it, then somebody else will be given that to do. You don't have to worry about that. So that's yeah, it's, I don't know, many hands make light work in spirit for us.
My mother
Yeah.
used to say that to me all the time doing housework.
Yeah.
So you mentioned in the book there's these kinship relationships where your grandmother could be your niece or nephew or something. It's like
Yeah.
interesting. How does that work? Like for you,
Well, my niece's
Apalech.
daughter recently had a daughter, and so she's my auntie, that little baby.
Why? Why is she your
So, well,
auntie?
it goes around every three. So your great grandmother, your
Oh,
great grandmother is your niece. Your great
oh.
grandfather or daughter, Yeah, it goes around like that.
And what are the obligations of those relationship with the niece and the great grandmother, whatever? Are there special? I know because you're my nephew that I have responsibilities as your
Yeah.
uncle.
Yeah. I mean, there's just that respect, that you have for an auntie. So that baby will be in the same line, and in the same category as your own aunties, who are, if they're your mum's sisters, then they're all your mothers, you know. So there's that respect and that power that comes to that new generation. So that power is always distributed, and it's not a meritocracy. You just have that. In terms of where you're born in the kinship system,
And
you
hopefully you
inherit
live up to it.
those respects. Hopefully, you live up to it. And you might progress to higher responsibilities there, but you also might not. But everybody's. I don't know anyone who isn't happy with where they are. I don't know anybody who wants more knowledge or desires more knowledge. Everybody's happy with their place or where they are because everybody carries important knowledge anyway, crucial knowledge, and speaks for different things.
And what's your particular knowledge gift in terms of the Appalach people?
Yeah. Well, carving is kind of my vocation. I guess you'd say. But also I kind of have an embassy role in translation.
Is that
Out
Canadian,
to broader groups, globally, and
like me?
in terms of dominant culture and things like that. Yeah. Um, yeah, there's several different roles and there's different things that I care for. But I have an older brother, when Steve, and
Is he
so he
biological or
speaks
adopted?
for no adoptive, but I mean that's the same for us anyway. With that customary adoption. And there's different kinds of adoption too. There's adoptions that are temporary, just for while you're in a place, so people know what to call you.
Oh,
But then when you leave that place, that's not, you have no claim to that. But with this one, it's a full customary adoption, which means I have to be that no matter where I am and have those obligations. You know, um, yeah, so I have family always like coming down to stay with us, so they go to school down here if we can't access. It's hard to access good education back up home. There's We're starting the year this year back up home with a staff shortage at the school, shortfall of seven teachers short.
Wow.
In a very small school. So
A primary
it's
school.
yeah, it's pretty dire. It's everything. It's like right through from the little ones right the way through to year 10. And then if you want to go through the last 2 years of education, you have to go elsewhere to boarding school or, go to the nearest sort of center at the mine. There where all the miners' kids are. Yeah. Um, Not many make it through there. And the Asian pretty, I mean, it's always failed there as well. Yeah.
But what
Yeah, so I have quite a few roles and things that I speak for in different species and places and stuff like that. But that's um my older brother has the authority with that. So he speaks for those things. I speak from those things, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. He
Yeah,
sets the policy and you carry it out.
yeah, that's it.
What was the impetus? Okay, I know that you went to college because your scores were low and you majored in education, so that directed you to be a teacher, which you
Mm,
were. But that there's a whole other big chasm to be getting a PhD and being a
mm,
professor. So what
yeah.
enabled that?
Well, it was just always ego, always just narcissism, I guess. Um, you know, I I found myself in a staff room where I was the only Aboriginal teacher, and I had like a decade of teaching experience, but I was finding that first year teachers are sort of first out, fresh from college, non-Aboriginal teachers, they were getting kind of promoted into positions of authority above me. And then, I was quite excluded, you know, from the staff room and, all that kind of thing. And, you never invited to the staff barbecues. And so I just thought, if I get a master's degree, then I'll be equal to a non-Aboriginal person coming out of college in the first year. I'll be equal at least to them. And then I found out that I wasn't. So I did another master's degree. I thought I forgot two master's degrees,
That'll do it.
and I just wasn't. So it was just ego stuff, like I wanted to just be equal to the teachers around me, and yeah. So eventually I went for that, and I found myself, uh, yeah, like I was just what I call like a replacement teacher. I call them substitute there, I think.
Correct.
Substitute teacher. I found myself there doing that. And I was just like, all right, what if I get a doctorate? um, yeah. And then I got a doctorate and I don't know. Yeah, things kind of changed there and I ended up consulting and all that kind of thing. Uh, did a lot of decolonial stuff in education. So a lot of critiques of, colonial education. And in Sand Talk, you'll see like a massive kind of conspiratorial rant there about Prussian education being based on eugenics and exported all through the world and based on animal husbandry techniques and dumbing down the kids. Very libertarian kind of history of education there because I was watching a lot of Russia Today at the time. So if you're watching Russia Today, just don't look it up on YouTube. It's a lot of propaganda stuff that you can feel yourself align with if you're, remotely sort of anarchist or libertarian or as I was even anti-colonial. You can find a lot to align with there, but then there's other stuff that gets you. You end up with just a skewed story, a wrong story of history that, you know, even if it seems to be going in the right direction, it causes you to aggregate facts around that story rather than, really looking at the whole picture and listening to all stories, which is kind of our law. And so I excluded the story of education as being, something that was supposed to allow the working class to have a rich inner life and be able to discuss philosophy and to study science and talk about science so that they would have a rich inner life after the drudgery of their 8 hours, of work. And also that there could be an informed, an intelligent, educated, informed public that could make sensible decisions in voting, to make democracy function, all these kinds of things. So, there is that story of education, which is also true. And if you leave that out, then you don't have the whole picture. And now, recently, as a parent of neurodivergent children, and finding and having them go to a school where they don't just say, all children are included or catered for, but they say all children belong. All children belong. And they've won like a big award nationally for being the most inclusive school. And I think it's because they use that word belong and they do whatever it takes. And so my kids who wouldn't belong anywhere, who would be kicked out of most schools, they have a place to go. I used to critique the fences around schools because they're all the same in Australia. They look like the bars of a prison, I'm grateful for those now because both my children are flight risks and they'll run straight out onto the road.
Oh boy.
So I'm grateful for the bars. So I don't know. I guess certainty is the enemy. For a lot of years, I was quite certain, and my anti-colonial, scholarship, which was based on, a very good tradition of scholarship, got twisted. And that anti-side just sort of, with all the disinformation that's out in the world, it attracted a lot of those particles to it. And a lot of us have gone that way. So that former land rights activists are now, hardcore sovereign citizen movement activists and anti-masking, anti-vaccine kind, you know what I mean? And watch out for the New World Order and Hillary Clinton's eating babies and all this kind of thing. A lot of us have gone that way. And I managed to spot it and pull back from it. It was when I was reading, I was in the sound booth doing the voice work for the audio book of Sand Talk. And when you read your own words back to yourself, that's when you go, oh shit, hang on.
Did I say
I'm
that?
talking about chemtrails there. I don't say the word chemtrails, but I'm like really edgelording around the whole climate engineering thing in a way that's kind of hinting at conspiracy and just sort of nudging people in that direction. Like, all right, I heard it. I heard it that time. You start to see these things in yourself and wonder where these flawed logics come from. Hey, then I started studying logical fallacies, which is a whole amazing science in itself. And I started seeing where I was using those, particularly ad antiquitatem and ad naturam. Yeah, these are really old, like Aristotle started this study. And so and then the Romans took it up after that. So that's why they're all in Latin, all the old ones. But they're like so I was doing a lot of argument uh, for argument from nature and argument from tradition. If it's old, it's good. If it's natural, it's good, which is not true. A lot of
Not
harmful things in
necessarily.
nature, not a lot of harmful things in old traditions as well. And if you don't adjust those to your changing context, then you got trouble. And a lot of the wellness industry and that kind of individualized, commercialized, PR driven, everyone's a bloody everybody's an entity, a commercial entity unto themselves, and you have to do your branding and all that. A lot of that's come out from that. And a lot of this sort of, people trusting their intuition and just the immediate patterns that they desire to see around them and aggregate around these wrong stories. A lot of that's
And
come
it's
out from that.
hedonistic.
Yeah, yeah, and highly individualized. So everybody is both a content consumer and a content creator at the same time. And that just creates a just this positive feedback loop that just keeps, scaling and scaling and scaling this disinformation industry to the point where it is currently tearing the world apart. I would call it the number one existential threat, disinformation, which is why I've shifted a lot of my research to that. And my next book after Sand Talk is looking at disinformation a lot. And that and a lot of my research now is actually debunking a lot of the things I said in Sand Talk
Like what?
as disinformation. Well, the chapter on lemonade for headaches, it's called, which is kind of the medicine chapter. There's a lot of that is
Oh, men's armpit
disingenuously.
sweat. That's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. And yeah, but there's cool stuff like that, but always attached to those things are big leaps of logic and exhortations
But do you
to
still
like,
stand by the armpit sweat can be healing for some women's issues?
yeah, but that's true. What's faulty logic after that is where I like cherry pick aspects of medical research around pheromones. I cherry pick that to sort of just, in a very quick and silly way, just completely discredit all medical research based on the fact that most of the scientific research around the effects of male armpit sweat on the vascular systems of others is basically just for creating pheromone sprays uh, to try and trick
Sexual attraction.
women to having sex with you. So I kind of going, yeah, look, all these, medical science is just all these perverts, and you know what I mean? It's just those usual, where you're doing ad hominem attacks almost, where you're just trying to characterize a whole group of people in one way with these negative attributes. And we know where that fricking leads, don't we? Yeah. And I was quite, you know, brazenly doing that.
Cherry picking.
Yeah. Just cherry picking and demonizing and creating false binaries all the time. So, bush medicine good, modern medicine bad. But as somebody with bipolar who pretty much couldn't function now without you know, the civilized medication for this civilized illness. I can't say that anymore in the same way. I can say for sure that bush medicine works in the bush and for all of the pathologies that you face in a life on the land. But if you're not living that, if you're living in a city, then you need medicines of the city for the pathologies of the city.
Oh,
There's
interesting.
still there still is not a natural medicine treatment for syphilis, and there probably will never be because syphilis is not a natural illness. It's a consequence of imperialism, expansion, uh, concentrated sedentary communities where until 100 years ago, they were still throwing their shit in the street.
Yeah, and going to the
Like,
bathroom in the
oh,
street.
well, yeah, yeah. Building their settlement right on the waterway where they do their drinking and throwing their shit on the street and wondering why they all got cholera. They were doing that. I saw a picture of the second biggest telescope in the world. Like just last century, early last century, there was in Melbourne the second biggest telescope in the world. This marvel of technology for the time. And, it was a big point of pride in the colony that they had this, but they didn't have any plumbing or sewerage or sanitation. And they were still throwing their night soil out on the street with all the horse poo. It's yeah, nothing is 100% true and 100% certain. You know, um, it's you can try and set up all the false binaries you like, but things are more complex than that always.
Yeah, because we're
Yeah.
complex.
So the
Well,
diseases, created by civilizations like that, they have to be treated with the medicines created by those systems in response to those things within those systems. And if you're living at the overlap with that system, or you're living completely within that system, then you're going to need the medicine from that system. So you can't have binaries like nature good, man-made bad.
Right.
Yeah.
Before we leave education, you say that education, effective education process is more important than content, metaphor and storytelling, creative activities are instructive, so that boring kids and confining them is the worst thing we could do in terms of education.
Yeah.
What would you add to that in terms of like teachers? You should always be thinking about storytelling, fun, movement. What should the
Yeah.
teacher use as their
Uh,
guidelines?
So these are all Indigenous pedagogies, but at the same time, you know, all my doctoral research pretty much showed that the best available and the most you know, proven effective pedagogies from around the world all pretty much align with Indigenous pedagogies. So just, you know, follow the research, like, and not, I mean, not just the commercial research that's done to promote a particular phonics program, you know, but follow that. And I don't know, the confinement thing, like I was saying before with the bars, you know, with my like really neurodivergent kids, I'd kind of like them to learn how to endure confinement, because their life in this colony is going to depend on their capacity to endure confinement and to endure boredom and long hours of tedious work. That is what you do to be sheltered and fed here. So in some ways, you know, you also need to train students up for enduring those things. I mean, if you make that your entire curriculum, then you're going to ensure that the bottom third are excluded. But then that serves an economic purpose as well, because, you know, it is a sorting hat, you know, the school, you know, it's about sequencing all your children. You have this in the States too, where, you know, if you're in a school in a poor neighborhood or an ethnically diverse neighborhood, you cannot get an A because that's moderated always down to a B or a C, you know. You know, your best students. You know, we have moderation here too. I remember as a teacher, you know, you go through and grade all your students, and you would prepare your students to do the absolute best and get 100 on the test. So you've got a whole heap of these A pluses, and then your head of department would have to sit down and moderate all of those scores into a bell curve with you, because it must be in a bell curve. And then that must be aggregated with all the other schools by postcode in order to sequence all of those students at the end with a score. And you must have the bottom third who are going to be underclasses, you know, who are going to go to prison, who are going to be on welfare, who are going to only ever be able to get part-time or casual work. And you need that for the economy to even exist. In order for anything to have value, you have to have more demand than supply, which means you have to have increasing numbers of people missing out in order for anything to be priced or have value, or for the economy to continue growing, which it must, or you're in a depression or a recession, you know. Yeah, this must occur. If you end up with everybody employed, then you have inflation. And you look every time there's too much inflation, the economists and politicians talk immediately of increasing the unemployment rate, because the more
They don't
unemployed
talk
people
about
you,
it. They talk
yeah,
about raising the interest rate.
yeah, but that's what that effect is immediately. When you're raising interest rate, it increases unemployment, and the increase in unemployment is what affects the inflation. You know, it'll hold it there, or it will bring it way down. You know, yeah, because that's the way it is. If everybody's got just enough money to survive without struggling, then the prices are pushed up, you know, and that's all there is to it. So in a growth-based economic system, that's what you've got. Your education system has to actually do that, and you know, I don't know if I want to be sitting in this economy when the entire economy collapses. I don't want to be sitting in this colony when it all crashes down. because I'm too close to the bottom and I don't want it falling on me. You know, so, maybe schools need to do that, and they need to condemn a third of their students to hell on earth, because that's what is needed. That's what is needed for even those people to be able to survive. That's the system we're in. And, our students must learn how to endure it, because it is unendurable. Otherwise, you do need to learn how to do that. Part of that bargain was the idea that everybody would have access to learning so they could have a rich inner life.
Or so they could
But
do a job and make money.
that's it. But everybody has access to all the knowledge on the planet right now, and they're not accessing that. They're mostly kitten and puppy photos and videos of kids falling off swings, or sports accidents, and porn and everything else. That's most of it.
Why do you think human beings are so unevolved?
No, we're perfectly evolved, and we're the most perfectly adaptive species around. We have simply adapted to the system that's been placed over us, and we've adapted really well to it. Those people aren't, lesser people, or the kitten videos people. These are people who adapted perfectly to their context, which is what humans do.
So
We
if,
don't have any choice. We don't have any choice on this system that's imposed on us. That's
so
our
if,
masters
if
who
we got
impose
rid
it.
of if we got rid of neoliberalism and capitalism, do you think that would be the
Well,
solution?
who's the we? We can't. What do we need? A shift in consciousness? Shift in consciousness has already happened. Most of the people on the planet are lined up with the idea that people should be able to live their lives, and self-govern, and have equal rights, and people should be able to marry whoever the hell they want to marry. Everybody should have access to clean water, clean air, shelter, and decent food. The living planet should not die. I mean, everyone's pretty much aligned with that. The great shift in consciousness has already happened, and it's just been proven to have no effect whatsoever, because 98% of us on the planet we're not the ones who are capable of changing things. It's only that 1 or 2% who can do that. And why would they want to change it? They've got.
Why is there an increasing interest in electing strong men like Orban and
Yeah,
Trump and
yeah.
Bolsonaro and Putin?
Well, that's that amazing sleight of hand. People are living in unbearable conditions, and you get them to vote against their interests and vote for regulation, and for, no taxation of the rich, and for cuts to social services, and your shitty roads on Turtle Island, and bridges and buildings, which are starting to look like a third world country. I've been there, and it's shame. Um,
Why is that?
Honolulu looks like a third world country. This is what I felt like. The tent cities springing up all over the place and then getting bulldozed down. You know, yeah, that people are encouraged to vote against their best interests, and to vote for strongmen and totalitarianism, because they see those things as being the only way that can change things. They see those people make promises, strongmen, that they are going to bring the system down, and that they are going to avenge,
That's
the
interesting.
oppressed. But they shift to make sure that the oppressed have different enemies who aren't the rich, that they are like violently opposed to like trans kids who want to play sport, and this must be stopped. All these stupid things, and this vague general idea of wokeness. It's like, oh, we have to stop the woke, who are Satanists, who
Are
are
you are you
etc.
having
etc.
that woke
There is a
stuff in?
spiritual war. There's a spiritual war between, heaven and hell. It's angels and demons, and the strong man is going to make sure that all these people are eradicated, that they're vermin, they are rats, and this language has been used before.
Yeah,
And it appeals to people, especially people who used to have privilege but are finding it slipping. because of the economic system and the
But do you
need to
have that happening?
continuously grow the underclasses. That has to end up including some people who belong to the dominant culture. And that forms your base for a strong man. It shifts the Overton window. So people who were in the center are now right. People who were left are now center. People who are
Is that
far left
happening?
radicals are now left, and that they are never in government.
But is that happening in Australia as well? The wokeness and the trans kids stuff?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
5 minutes after it happens there, it happens here. Remember the Canadian truckers,
oh,
the
they
big
went on
convoy,
strike. Yeah,
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 and the blockades with the
yeah.
trucks, and it was all these white supremacists and yoga teachers sitting together in the same drum circles. Hashtag save the children. From the Satanists, etc. Um, yeah, that was like a couple of days later, we had graffiti, spray painted over billboards here in Melbourne. Hold the line, Canada. We there is no lag. Australia used to be like 20 years behind the US. Then it was 5 years. Now it's 5 minutes. Uh, it's, the machinations of Steve Bannon, with the technology that he brought with him from Cambridge Analytica, that's been deployed, horrendously through, him, Peter Thiel's, different, think tanks and all the packs and all that sort of thing. These ones are deploying these mechanisms globally and fostering revolutions towards authoritarianism all around the globe. And that's something that the US has always done well. They used to do it with pamphlets dropped from helicopters. Now they do it through Twitter and with troll farms. Russia does the same. China does the same. Everybody's playing the game, but all of them are steering, even though they're opposed to each other, they're all steering everyone towards authoritarianism, totalitarianism, and the desire for a strong man to come in and right all the wrongs, punish the evildoers, be your retribution, and that's all the messaging. And there are really good people who are like wellness gurus who are there doing that now, who are, um, who are part of the RFK campaign, etc. And, now talking about, COVID being engineered to have no effect on Asians and Jews and only kill white people, and stuff like that. And, and some of these are my friends, and I'm going, what are you doing? What are you doing? Where are you going with this, brother? You know, we were all about, something different just a few short years ago. We were all around, breaking down the big power structures into more regional sovereignties and, more localized community and localized supply chains and, economies that would be vibrant and, with big velocity of the dollar, within communities and then between communities and, all this sort of exciting stuff. But whenever you are involved in something like that, where you're promoting, rapid and complete transformation of, a political system or a global system, you invariably and inevitably move towards reactionary politics
Backlash.
yeah, it doesn't take long before you're thinking that that political violence is acceptable. And your strong men advocate the political violence, and a lot of people are willing to carry that out. And if you have an enemy, you just make sure everybody knows where they live, because out of your like 2 million followers, there will certainly be 10,000 people at any given moment who are in the middle of a psychotic break and happy to go into their house with a fucking hammer, you know. Yeah,
So
it's
if you were philosopher king, what would you do to counter that evil
I
tendency?
I say that question is where everyone always ends up in every interview, and I always caution people that that's part of that wrong story pattern. That's part of the thinking and part of the culture that leads towards inevitably towards authoritarianism. You know, everybody's always asked, if you were in charge, what would you do? It's the wrong question.
What's the right question?
Well, if authority and power were distributed in your community,
Okay.
what could your community do? You know, if I was in charge, I would immediately resign or kill myself. It just to save the world. That's the only way you could save the world if you were the king of it, would be immediately to undo the monarchy. Because, you know, your ideas, as well-meaning as they could be, and as fair and loving as they could be, would result in destruction because they're unilateral, and you're trying to enforce those through hierarchical power structures and the threat of violence. It's the only way you can do it. So, no, I don't want to fantasize about
No.
what I could do if I controlled uh, the weapons of mass destruction and the threat of violence, if I had that bigger than everyone else. It's a wrong place for me to go in my head, because then I'm back when I was a kid, like, um, learning how to beat people half to death with a piece of wood, learning how to box and fight dirty, learning how to, poke somebody's eye out, because you have to know how to do that. Why the hell do you need to know how to do that? And then I'm back in that place in my head, and I'm like Conan the Barbarian, running, hitting people with a sword, saying, "To hell with you. Uh, be useful." Yeah. Nah,
Are there Aboriginal,
nah.
are there tribal communities that are doing some of that positive, creating a model for living close to the earth? I mean, has it been so decimated by the colonial structure that it's
Mm.
lost its
Look,
spiritual?
no matter what happens, the law is still there. The law of the land is still there. A lot of places people go wrong. Native titles sort of wrecked things because it creates these hierarchies. You end up with committees running things, and that committee is usually one or two powerful families in the community that have been elevated because of their capacity to agree with the most authoritarian, totalitarian, extreme right-wing views, and then they're the ones who get the most media coverage, so they get to be powerful and famous by going, yeah, these, we've just got to take welfare away from these people, and you know, they in the middle of the desert and tell them to get a job, oh, these lazy people, these violent people, yeah. The people who can say the most extreme things on the right, they're the ones that get all the power, they get all the media coverage, etc. um yeah, so you have all these, like, wrong governance and sovereignty models that are coming into our communities, but the law of the land remains and always will. This is physical substance and an energy in the land, and we have those stories. And even if you're not living on your homeland, even if you've never seen your homeland, you have stories or fragments of those stories, and you carry that law. Even the fragments I had as a child, were enough to direct me to where I ended up here today. There's a lot you can do with fragments. And, so if I can do that, then I keep telling settlers, you can do that too. You don't have to take from our culture or learn our culture or take on our law, for yourself. You're in embassy with that. But, the answers you're looking for and the indigeneity you're looking for, it's in your own traditions. It's there. You'll find it. It's the stuff your grandmother did. Um, all the all the different rules and laws and norms and superstitions and things like that. There's a patterning there. There are fragments, for you to work with, and you can humbly work with those fragments without being humbled. If you can, you see an Aboriginal culture as a model. This idea that nobody's above anybody else. You don't have power over. People of knowledge have authority, but that's different. Power is distributed, and you are loved. You are respected, no matter what you know or who you are. Um, you know, and this may be perverted in a lot of our communities now, as everything is perverted around the world. But that law is eternal and will last longer than the rare earth metals that are called rare for a reason. When the last of those are dug up, you know, when they become so scarce that there's nothing to run all this technology or to start your Mars colony, you know, then that law of the land will still be there, still be waiting for us. Mm.
I did a book about climate girls saving our world, including some Australian girls. And I'm
Mm.
using that word because they were teenagers. And their main focus seemed to be the Adani mine that's
Hmm.
polluting the Great Barrier Reef. And I
Yeah,
wondered if,
that's on my spouse's country.
uh,
Yeah, she speaks for that.
so I'm
Um,
wondering if there's like an Indigenous voice that's involved in trying to,
there are many Indigenous voices. Look, we have there are people that we jokingly call coal aunties and gas aunties,
they
and
get money from the
yeah,
extraction.
they get royalties from that, or they get paid for that to govern the communities in certain ways or produce content, you know, that you know, discredits anybody who's trying to get in the way of the mines. Uh, and I don't know, in that place, it's that the joke is that some of the elders are called Adantes, like Adani, you know, Adante, you know. Yeah, so yeah, that's there, that's happening, and that'll always happen. And you know, I guess we'll oppose it as long as we can, but it's kind of inevitable. It's all gonna go. It all must go. You know, Australia is only a first world country based on the back of extraction. All the other first world countries in the world had a long, hard path of developing, you know, over centuries, you know, cultures, economies, um, you know,
Industry.
and embassies and industries in this way, and you know, became first world countries that way. Australia only it didn't have to develop a culture, it didn't have to develop anything. It simply had to extract and became so wealthy from that that it's classified as a first world country. But in terms of you know, so many indicators, it is not a first world country, and that is very tenuous. That is very precarious, the first world status. It's, you know, it's basically white fellas in the middle of on black fellas land in the middle of Asia. And they are an outpost, you know, of the weird Western educated, industrialized, rich, democratic sort of dominant culture of the planet, which is an incredibly small minority of people. You know, English is a first language speaker. Category is, you know, one of the smallest language. I mean, it's a tiny language group on the planet. People who speak English as a first language, but it is the dominant language of the planet. You know, we use their, you know, you know, Catholic, Protestant, etc. calendar. You know, we use their days of the week. You can't be in time and place without an English, you know, orientation. English is everything. You know, it's and language is what makes place, is what makes people, culture. It shapes the waterways more than the wolves do. Language is all. Yeah, that's where we are, you know, and you adapt to your context because you're a human being. And that's all we can do. But you've got to be following the signal, not the noise.
Mm,
Here's the thing, people are adapting now to the noise.
mm,
You know, there is ontology and there is epistemology. So there's the ways of being, you know, like what is real. And then there is epistemology. It's like ways of knowing.
knowing.
So that's more about what is true, which is different from what is real. Has to be a broad common ground understanding of what is real. And then there are lots of elaborations and interpretations on that, which are epistemological, what is true about that. And that's what makes culture. There has been a flip that's gone like this, where that's separated. And now truth is the ontology. And, you know, real is the epistemology. Real is movable. Real is up for grabs and is problematic knowledge. And truth is the new reality. And
Where
your
does,
personalized version of truth is, you know, is now the reality. And unfortunately, this came out of you know, postmodernism, post-colonialism, deconstructivism, which was challenging power. But eventually those tools were left on the battlefield and taken up by the right and the authoritarians and totalitarians. They picked up those tools of postmodernism and they flipped the world on its head.
Hmm.
That's how we end up in a post-truth world. Anything that's real can just be challenged by, well, no, that's not my opinion. It's
Well,
like,
especially with
hey,
AI now.
yeah, yeah. It's like, hey, we're walking uphill. Well, my opinion is that we're walking downhill. And then that's got to be, you have to accommodate that reality, and it's not a reality.
And someone
You
could
know,
make a video with AI showing you walking down the hill.
that's it. So when I say we're an adaptive species and that we adapt to signal, from our ontology, from our reality around us, we'll adapt to that actual reality. Things are getting hotter, for example. We adapt to that. The weather is changing. You know, you adapt. That's signal. Noise is no, it's not. No, it's not. Actually, polar bears are freezing to death. And then we don't adapt to the reality. Then we adapt to the truth,
I think Trump still says
which is
climate
not
change
real.
isn't man-made, human-made.
Yep. Or says, well, okay, yes, it is, but it's too late.
I
So,
don't say that.
and we've got to push through. We've got to burn through because you know what? Plants eat CO2. So the more CO2 there is, the more plants there are. So the plants, if we put CO2, then that's the most environmentally friendly thing we can do because there'll be more plants and more trees. And it'll take care of all the CO2, which is bad, but it's not. So we need to burn more of it. We need to burn more of it and push through. And that's what will stop climate change.
Oh boy.
Burning more fossil fuel. Because, well, no, that's my opinion. That's my truth.
Don't forget cow farts.
You're lying.
That's a
The
big thing.
science, the scientists are lying. And then so yeah, once again, um, ontology becomes epistemology, becomes the death of everything.
Okay, where does the concept of dreaming fit in? Is dreaming is epistemology?
No,
Because
it's like
dreaming is like
okay, it's like
access.
the Jews have the written Torah and the oral Torah. In the written
Midrash.
Torah is the ontology. That is what's real. That's fixed. But the oral Torah, that's the adaptive part. That can be elaborated on by individuals and groups and can change. And that's what accounts for the massive diversity within, the Jewish community globally that's allowed for them to maintain their languages and cultures, from thousands of years ago to maintain those in perpetuity, no matter where they are at the same time as acculturating to wherever they land and mastering the languages and cultures of that place and being of that place. So, the oral Torah is the elaboration. And so, you have this. In our way, the dreaming stories are ontology, because they're about creation entities that have left their essences in the landscape, and that essence is law. It's communicative, it's patterned, it there is an informatics to that runs all through an ecological system. It's the communication in all that system, and you can measure these things biologically, but in our way, those occluded informatics, these are regarded as spirit. We call those spirit, and we don't think of that in spiritual ways or religious ways. Spirit is just an ecological thing, a biological thing. It's just there, and that is our ontology. And we agree with that sunrise to sunset dreaming, continental common law, that is agreed upon as our common ground reality. Then we elaborate. So the Southern Cross constellation might be an emu footprint in one of our stories, and in another it might be a stingray. In another one it might be two galahs, chasing a boy who's chasing an old man. Yeah, and that's how that goes, because that reflects the different laws of different bioregions, but all grounded in a common ontology. Now we can elaborate on this over deep time. We elaborate on this in real time as well in our yarning and in our ceremonies. Things adapt, things change. We take on things from other cultures. We have Polynesian dancers coming into a lot of, our ceremony upon over the last 50 years or so. There's a lot of hula and stuff like that because we have embassy with Polymub, And so these things change and these things elaborate. But, those two Apalech brothers, they are still common foundational, ontology that others will respect as well.
Is the concept of like intelligence or spirit or information in the land, is it the way I would think of it is Davis, the Devas? There's a sense that there are ruling spirits, like there's the cabbage deva and the mole deva and the redwood tree deva, and they're an intelligence, a spirit. There's a spirit. There's
Mm.
spirits.
Mm.
They govern. Is it something like
And
that?
look,
Something different?
uh, people talk about polymorphic morphic resonance or something like this. And, I don't know about that. It's an interesting theory, but, inevitably there are patterns replicated, everywhere. So you might have a mole in the northern hemisphere, and then we have a marsupial mole here, and they're almost identical in how they look, but they evolved completely separately
Mm.
from completely different, not even the same tree, let alone the same branch,
I
you know.
interviewed
But that pattern came
yeah.
through there, and there are patternings, like I know Mulga country really well from Western New South Wales, but then I go out to the Kimberley in Western Australia and a country that I go, oh my God, is that Mulga country? But I'm looking, no, those aren't Mulga trees, no, completely different thing. But I understand the pattern, of that ecosystem and of that country there because it's a similar patterning to the Mulga country that I know from Western New South Wales.
I interviewed a physics Nobel Prize winner named Brian Josephson, and he talks about intelligent design. Not that
Mhm.
God created everything in 6 days, but there's an intelligence in the creation.
There's knowledge in everything, you know. So ants have knowledge, and we see this. You can see this in the patternings. You can see this in its responsiveness to and its shaping of, weather systems, water systems, climate. You see it with that totemic partnership they have with yabbies, like those little tiny freshwater lobsters, in the waterways who perform the same function and do the same dance as the ants do on the riverbank. You watch. The other day, I'm in a place where there's meat ants, and it was overcast, and then I see the meat ants start to bring out all these little white crystal rocks, and within 10 minutes, the entire ant mound will be covered in those white crystal rocks, and that
Why?
will be well because that means I know that the clouds are about to break. The sun's going to come out, and they need that reflective white rocks to maintain the constant temperature.
That
And they
is
are
intelligent.
constantly rearranging the red, the black, and the white rocks on their ant mound
Wow.
to moderate and modify to keep the temperature constant, in the nest. They have symbiotic relations with different plants and insects and butterflies and larvae and things like this. These things are there. They can only mate when certain conditions are absolutely perfect, and then you've got all these ants that just transform, with wings in anticipation of that moment when there's no wind and the temperature is just right and it's warm, and then there's that big mating ceremony that happens, and it has to be at exactly the right moment or there will be no more eggs, so it's got to be just right. And, I think I write about in Sand Talk an elder who knows how to read those signs so well that he knew the exact second that the winged ants would emerge. And so he's walking through the bush with us, and then he points at a nest and he goes, now. And they all came out, you know. Ants have knowledge, and the entire ant system has knowledge in the way that it overlaps with all the other systems. They carry knowledge. So if we're talking about, intelligent design, I mean, design is a bit of a interventionist, extractive kind of term, but it's about as close as English can come. Intelligent, that's about that's a value-laden thing, which is about ranking and categorizing people uh, in terms of power in this society. That's not a great word for it either, but the way we say knowledge, the way we say spirit, the way we say, all of these things, you know, design isn't something that's unilateral. It's something the entire system does all together. And it's those creation entities are our story for making sense of how all that works.
But the
You
point is,
know,
it's not just random chance.
yeah, well, it's not just random chance, but it's also not it's not tinkered. It's not clockwork. The systems are chaotic. They go through periods of hysteresis, homeostasis, disruption and stability. You get this. It can't be tinkered. When you interfere with systems from outside of the system, you end up with entropy. But if you're moving within the system in response to the signals that you receive in that system, if you're genuinely part of it, then you're always where you need to be. And that system will always give you what you need too. If any problem you've got, if you pay attention or look around you, you'll find the things that you need. You got a broken chair, but you got no nails, have a good look around. I bet you find something, in the land that will help you out there if know how to receive that. Everything's there. You're hungry, there's food. And you just got to be able to look around you and the land will be there if you're part of that system. If you're not, if you're coming in from outside and you're designing, intervening, etc., that land closes to you and it does not share with you because you're not part of that system. It's like walking into a party. That I don't know. What if you walked into a white supremacist party and you're like a black trans dude? Uh, you are not in that system. You are not able to access the alcohol in that system. You are probably going to get the shit bashed out of you in that system. You can't intervene from outside. You go in and try and change attitudes there carrying a placard. You're going to end up with that placard shoved so far up your ass you won't be able to walk for a month. You know, yeah, no, you got to infiltrate. You got to get in there and listen to people's stories and say some things, or
What,
at least have a rough voice when you're there, and then people listen, and you gradually change hearts and minds. That's the way it used to be, anyway. It's not like that anymore.
a rough voice
Yeah.
doesn't do it.
Just relationships don't do it. Which is really hard because it's the only way to save a radicalized person. Is through relationships and through reaching out. But unfortunately, the protocols for interaction now are so violent that you reach out a hand to somebody, they'll cut off your arm, and then they'll hang that bloody arm on their totem pole and bloody scream and then tell everybody where you live. And then there'll be bricks through your window and your kids will get cut up at the front gate. Yeah, it's not the same world that it used to be.
This is a dystopian view, I must
Yeah,
say.
relationships are the only way to save the radicalized, but
And that's what
those
saved you.
that approach has been made unavailable to us. Also, reason doesn't work, has never worked. you know so it's tricky.
It's
It requires quite a Christ-like approach to things,
huh.
which you can do for a bit, and it's good to do that because you feel better about yourself. But then every now and then you've got to go, oh my God, these people, I'm just going to have to slap them, or cut them off. When you cut them off, they become someone else's problem. I don't know. It's tricky. There isn't anywhere to stand. There isn't anything good that you can do. Everything will harm. Right now, we're in that place. It's a upside down world, because the real is true and the true is real, and there is no common ground anymore, except for people who want to preach to the choir and like huddle together for comfort.
But
You'll
if you
find
take that
common ground.
nihilistic view, then why wake up in the morning?
It's not nihilistic view. That's the reality. The reality is that we're living in a nihilistic informatic system, and you have to respond to your context and you have to adapt. And we haven't actually found a way through it yet, a way to adapt. But every upheaval, every pathology within a system will eventually throw up an immune response. So let's hope that you and I become antibodies in this system, rather than pathogens. And at the moment, that's what's been happening. Anti-colonialist, decolonial activists, land rights activists, land back people. These people have been corrupted, radicalized, so that they're now pathogens. A lot of them become pathogens rather than thing. And then the signal gets mixed up with the noise. Somebody who's using decolonial language over here is really pushing for white supremacy. And that just so negates all of your language and all of your methods and all of your theoretical perspective and all of your basis in reality that's been built up over decades, from our warriors and researchers and scholars. That's all for nothing now. There are no words. There are no words anymore.
Do you find any hope from your students in university?
Not particularly. Lots of people are talking about things like regenerative finance and things like this, Yeah. There's a lot of, regen activists and a lot of hopers and dreamers around holochain, blockchain, as ways of establishing reality and not being able to undo it. But there are hard forks in those things, and governance is required, and one reality can be chosen over another whenever one of those things gets hacked. So, I think for as long as we have this technology that's allowing us to talk to each other over a screen from different time places, then for as long as we have that, then I think reality is manipulable, and people and populations and knowledges are also manipulable.
So there is hope.
Well, eventually the rare earth metals will run out, and then we'll get back to like I said, the hope is deep time thing. Hope is in the fact that the law of the land remains and always will remain, and will always bring us back to it, one way or another. Yeah.
How personified can the law of the land be? I mean, talking about ghosts and dealing with ghosts with smudging and that kind of thing suggests that the spirit does keep a form after the physical body dies. So are there like spirits on the other dimension? Do you believe in reincarnation? Do you think there's like angelic helpers? How personified is the intelligence?
This is tricky because intellectually I'm a skeptical atheist. So I'm or an atheistic skeptic who nonetheless collects and disposes daily of all the hair in the house because I'm afraid that a Puri man will get hold of it and curse us. So I generally direct my skepticism to everybody else's culture, and I believe mine's the only right one.
What is that?
I'm self-aware. I'm self-aware enough to know this about myself. So I don't believe it when settlers tell me there's ghosts. I seldom believe them.
But you experienced it so that you smudged.
I know. I've seen like physically the rainbow serpent twice in my life. So I know that's a creation entity that is real. I've seen it. So I know there are creation entities. I can't believe in any monotheistic religion. I believe their gods exist, but as entities somewhere of a place. So I know over somewhere between the Tigris and the Euphrates and in that general sort of region that there's a dude that they don't say his name over there. They say Adonai, I believe, and that there are, that there's like Allah and there's all these things. I know there are these entities in those places, and that they travel a fair bit and expand a fair bit because they're kind of imperial. But I also know there are different creation entities in, every bioregion on this continent and across the seas and skies and space and the universe. These things are everywhere. Anyway, I kind of feel that. But at the same time, I don't know, I think if people are buried in this idea of my God's the only God, my God, your spirit doesn't exist, only my conception of spirituality exists. I think that's where all the problems arise, and I'm really skeptical of those things. I'm also skeptical of people who just run around randomly picking bits and pieces of, other people's knowledge and, a bit of tarot card here, a bit of crystal there. The land gifted me this feather there. I'm skeptical of them, often in unfair ways. Um, yeah. So I don't know. I'm too mixed up on this to be able to give any reasonable reasonable value judgment there
But what you're
about
convinced
any
of,
of it.
they're
But
creation entities.
so I tell you a story. I've got a really good friend, settlers who are pretty much our closest friends at the moment. And, so I go to their house one day and they're like, oh, there's a ghost, one of the rooms upstairs. And I'm like, oh, yeah. I don't know. And I was just like, yeah, yeah, whatever. And then I went up and there was.
Was it cold and how did
And
you
I,
notice it?
I, I shit myself. I mean, it was really clearly there. You feel it in your belly, on your skin, and it presses against you like opposite ends of a magnet. It pushes and pulls you, and you see that shimmer. Some people see the actual thing, they reckon, but sometimes I don't believe them. I never see the actual thing straight like that, but it was certainly there. And I don't know. So I actually did some cultured things that I know for how to get rid of that, and certain things to call out and smokes that you put there and different objects to use. And I don't know. I hadn't done it for years, so I was worried it wouldn't work. So I called up a brother and asked him to send me some of his Bizzo to help me get it done. And then at the end of it, I went, oh, it didn't work. And I lost my mojo. I shouldn't have even tried it. I probably made it worse. Um, but anyway, yeah, they said it gone, and the next time I went back, it was all clear there. Who knows? There are mass psychoses and delusions and illusions that people have together because we're so in sync, when we communicate on such a deep level. Um, Real or not real, true or not true, our relationship's stronger for that happening and us bonding together over that experience of spirit that we all experienced in different ways. Because I wouldn't let them watch me do it. I said it's not because it's secret or anything, but I was worried that if I was observed while I was doing it, that I might make it performative, that there might be some part of my ego that would say, oh, make this look more exotic, which I know we all have a tendency to do. Yeah, especially if you're in the ancient wisdom guru industry. It's you got to watch out for that. You got to perform things. So, yeah. And I see this a lot in ceremony now. Be right out in the bush. There's no audience. And everybody who traditionally would be dancing in a circle is dancing in a line or in rows, facing an imaginary audience.
Oh
So
dear.
that settler gaze is always there, even in ceremony with a lot of our
Wow.
peoples. What I like about my mob is that we've lost so much, but we still dance in circles facing inwards, and in other patterns as well. But that we're not we're in the funeral and all spread out in circles around this coffin, and we're dancing inwards. We're not in front of the coffin facing out to the settlers who are all sitting on camping chairs watching our exotic funeral ceremony. We don't do that for them. So that's something that's still strong with us. And you feel it. And you don't have to be the amazing dancer. I see a lot of people who do these big, showy, sort of flashy dances that all seem to look the same to me. And I don't know, with us, there's like minimal movement, and it's not there for, somebody else. It's there to hit all those right frequencies and, melodies, group sound, group movement, um, all clapping, stomping together a certain beat that puts us all in one belly, one big belly, mind. And there we all are. And that's what heals you, and that's what gets you through your morning. and all the stages of mourning. And yeah, and it just works. But the performativity, that's a whole nother thing. So I guess with spirits and all those sorts of things, we're dancing that funeral rite and doing the death wail to heal us, but also heal the person who's passed. And, the different, there's all different parts to that spirit, and that shadow part has to go somewhere and dissipate. That takes time, and the other parts have to go back to country. Other parts have to go to sky camp, and that all that energy's got to be recycled back around, through those totemic places. And that
What's in Sky Camp?
comes back. Sky camp is just a reflection of the earth in a lot of senses. So it indicates the seasons, and those are places and lands up there as well. Even between the stars. And I guess, there's a lot of matter and dark matter up there that, could be interpreted that way as well. But these are, you see all those gravitational effects in the systems up there, moving bodies and, short cycles and long cycles. And that's everything you need to know about time, is that it's subjective and that it's a huge, um, small wheels, big wheels, wheels inside, wheels outside, wheels all everywhere. And as you move through time, place, it's
Those are the
you're
patterns.
hopping through different kinds of time all the time, even in the circles, stories you're telling, even in this yarn here, different time, ways of doing story, different rhythm. If you're talking some way, especially ceremony and sacred stuff, then that keeps coming around another way. Oh. Yeah, so Sky Camp, it's there. There's seasonal movements. It's in different sacred places, have different stars for them. And, when they arrive in the same place and those as above, so below lines up, then that's time for ceremony, or it's time for, collecting a certain resource or hunting a certain animal, etc.
A lot of Indigenous people that I know revere ancestors, honor them, give offerings to them, ask for their guidance. So there's a sense that my grandmother, my great grandmother, my great grandfather, if I honor them and connect with them, they'll help me.
Yeah.
Is that true? And if so, that means that spirit goes on.
Well, you call out for those old people when you come to different places, because they, that they'll be there in that totemic site, and they'll protect you or won't harm you if you call out for them first. If they smell the smell, you're all good, so there's that. We don't do much of like, oh, my auntie, give me guidance, give me strength to get through this. It's not like prayer or anything like that. It's more, you see those signs, so sparrowhawk like weirdly comes down and lands in her backyard in a place where that sparrowhawk doesn't belong. It's like, oh my God, what does that mean? That's old mum's totem, and so then we all talk together, and there's this agreement. Yeah, that's her talk. Okay, what's she saying? So we interpret signals in that way, but we don't pre-interpret them or ask to be sent a sign or something like that. We're not seeking and longing for signs and guidance. We just accept, the spiritual signals that we just regard as bioinformatics, that happen in the landscape around you all the time. And, that's my mother's side totem, that sparrowhawk. So if it lands right there weirdly a few meters away and won't move, then I know something's going on. I know my little girl there with the magpie lark. She's up in Bemidji now. She's had trouble for so many years, and had so many near-death experiences. And, every time when that magpie lark, because we got them down here too, the tin, every time that comes and lands and dances or is agitated or, trying to land on my head or something, then I'll call her and say, what's going on, my girl, Um, and usually something terrible's happened, like she's been bashed or, you know, she's in hospital or she's stranded, you know, or she's lost. And, you know, one time when that happened, I called home, she was gone. No one knew where she was. She was missing, you know, so I dropped everything and flew up and spent a couple of weeks looking for her until I found her. You know, I found her and she was in a bad shape, and, you know, so I, you know, brought her back down here with me for a while and, you know, made sure she got heaps of medical treatment and help and just care for a while here, and then took her back up home again.
And
You know,
that
you
was your
just
daughter, your older daughter?
that's some well, she's like, okay, well, if you go by her mother's side, she's my sister. But if you go by father's side, no, hang on. Wait there, wait there. If you go by mother's side, she's my granddaughter. But if you go by father's side, she's my sister. But because I grew her up from a girl, like I raised her, she says, no, no, stuff all that. I call you dad, you know, you're my dad. So, you know, like everything, nothing's precise. It's about, you know, how I was saying before, you're moving through different time places. You're in one place and cycle, then you're in one time. It might be a seasonal thing, might be a daily cycle, you know. Might be a big star cycle or something like that, you know. It depends on your context. So when we're together, I call her my gal, and when we're, you know, when we're with her mother's family, I call her granddaughter. With her father's side family, I call her sister, like that. Yeah,
It keeps things
everything's
interesting.
everything's context.
Yes. What's the next book? So you
All
you
right, story, wrong story. It's that, I guess it's that whole epistemological ontological mess. You know, what a right story is. You know,
that's published.
those deep time collective, you know, solid understandings of reality versus, you know, these manipulated truth stories that are unilateral and fast and immediate and damaging, you know, so that disinformation, misinformation, you know, versus what is established carefully through embassy, which is basically, that's what science, real science does.
I read that I think 20 to 30% of Americans think that the sun is not the center of the solar system, the Earth is.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think it's the flat Earth. I mean,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yep. And it was, I think it was 65% of Republicans believe that immigrants are poisoning the blood of America, was the recent poll. But also, you got to look at the context of that. It's like most of these polls are carried out on landlines. So that it's like the only people who are asked their opinion are people who still have a phone
Old people.
in their house, a landline, and they will pick it up and talk to someone for 15 minutes about their opinions.
Yeah.
So I think most polls are BS.
And what about Declaration of Peace for Aboriginals and Nature?
Yeah, sure. It's still paper law, digital law. Wrong story, temporary. You can do that if you like. Yeah.
What book are you
But
working on?
what would that be? Would there be I don't know. This is a world where law can only be enforced by violence and threat of violence. And so you have to have the biggest stick. So who's the one with the big stick that's going to enforce the human rights of a river? Who's going to enforce a treaty? Yeah. Peace treaty that can only be enforced through violence. Yeah, you guys can give that a shot if it might be enough for you to keep doing stuff like that. So not
What's
much
your
I can do
next?
about that.
What book are you working on now?
Serpent law book. So it's different cultures all around the world, from Myanmar, Africa, India, China, yeah, Thailand, all around the world. Lots of different people's serpent lore, serpent folklore, serpent, ontologies, because the snake is the foundational ontology for most of the sustainable cultures on the planet. Most of the older cultures, the ones that weren't invented 5 minutes ago in a monastery, and don't believe that snakes are evil, have snakes as the foundation of lore. And, that rainbow serpent or dragon or whatever you want to call it, that one goes all around, and that's a common ontology that we have. So it's a way of establishing right story and a common ontology across cultures around the world. That's something I'll have a crack at doing. Me and my spouse, Megan, here, we're co-authoring this one and talking to people from all around the world. It'll be a shorter book, lots of color plates, because a lot of them are craftsmen and artists who just make and produce images of these amazing serpent beings. And they bind us all. So yeah, and lots of different elaborations on what those things mean and what their character is in different bioregions. But in the end, they're all serpent. So
And
there's an
they bring
ontology that we can
knowledge
have.
from the
Yep.
underworld up. Is that the symbolism?
Yeah, all kinds, all kinds. Yeah, sometimes they're things of earth, and sometimes they're things of sky, sometimes they're things of water,
Oh,
fire, or combinations of those things. It depends on where you are and how your bioregion expresses itself, how your lore expresses itself and language, in that place. But they're usually elemental kind of things. So yeah.
Um, anything that we've left out that you want to make sure we talk about?
What did you ask me for something before, like a little different sort of practice?
Yeah, at the end of the
something.
chapter, I want to have something that the reader can take away. Okay.
All right.
So I
Okay.
talked to the Buddhist priest, and he says, Om Tari Tutari Ture Soha.
Yep.
Chant.
Okay. All right. Seek the ant view. Seek the ant view of things. If that means you got to lie down and press your cheek to the ground and look at something from that angle, give it a shot. But once a day, just walk out or check around your house and see what the ants are doing.
Do
If
your
you know what
kids
the
do
ants are
that
doing,
now?
yeah, that's the first thing I taught them. Yeah, it's making a coconut shell thing for my daughter right now, and we've got the coconut out where the ants go, so the ants can clean it out for us. Now watching that daily. We always tell them to watch what the ants are doing, and they'll tell us straight away, like eggs. They're carrying eggs. Where are they carrying them, up or down? Are they carrying them up? Like, well, you want to get your umbrella, today, and then following that and understanding like where the scraps and carrion and rubbish goes and what the ants do to that, and understanding those flows always. Once you start following the ants, you'll start to follow the water. Even when the water isn't there, you'll know where it's going to flow. And if you follow those flows, you'll be in the system. And you'll be moving with it. You won't be trying to extract things and scale them up for your own magic or spiritual purposes. You'll just be in spirit. And spirit is basically just bioinformatics signals. It's a scientific way of interpreting that. Yeah. So there's a spiritual secularism for you to apply daily. Yeah.
Okay. And also I start each chapter, as you'll see, with a photograph, hopefully of you in action, like with a carving.
All right, I'll have a look through and send you. I was just deleting a whole heap of files on my computer, and there were some older things there. I'll send some over to you. Oops.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
This was fabulous. I'm so glad that you agreed to talk with me. I'm very grateful.
Yeah.
Let me talk to your spouse, whose name I don't know, and maybe she and I
Okay.
can talk another
For
time.
sure.
I
All
won't
right.
take any more
Hey,
family
she
time.
wants to say hello.
What's her name?
Specifically, Megsy.
Thank you.
Oh.
Oh, sorry, that's gone so much longer. Yeah.
Okay. Tyson.
He's kind of hanging around.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Hey, little man, show me your nappy. Show me your nappy. Show me your nappy. You boy. Hello again.
Hello. I wanted to see if we can set up a time to talk because I would like a woman's point of view and know how you teach the children and that kind of thing. So do you know about how this book is organized?
No, I'm not sure. No.
Okay, so I've sent him a draft so you can see it, but it's how families apply world religions. So
How families apply world religions, right?
right. So I have a section on Indigenous, which is where you all follow, and then Abrahamic religions, Eastern religions, new religions, like that. So I'm interested in the day-to-day practices and beliefs in real people's lives.
Okay. Okay. And so you wanted to set up a time.
Yeah. Do you have 10
At
minutes now, or is now a bad time?
I could do. It might actually be better to schedule a time. Actually, I
Okay.
think because there's a bit of business going on in the background.
Yes.
Um,
How were the
yeah.
bees? Were the bees okay?
they were great.
Oh, good.
They're recovering from almost total loss. They had a very hard winter.
Oh,
And when I say a hard winter, I don't mean that we had a very cold winter. I just mean that they were in a bad position and things like that. So I've just spent basically the spring and the summer just getting them recovering their strength. So they're in a good state now, which was good.
I don't even know your name.
Oh, I'm Megan.
And
So it's spelled Megan. And my surname is Kelleher. It's Kelleher.
and are you an academic as well?
Yeah, I'm doing a PhD looking at the affordances of blockchain and if they're culturally appropriate for Indigenous governance.
Blockchain, the only thing I think of is Bitcoin. And
yeah, yes. So it has gone far beyond just so Bitcoin was its first application. But it's been used for multitudes of use cases now. So now blockchain is really now seen as a coordination infrastructure.
oh, I had no idea. Okay, you are 19 hours ahead of me.
Sure. Yep.
When is a good time? It's good if we decide, I think if we talk about now a specific time, if that works for you.
Yeah, sure. So what time is it there for you now?
It's 5 p.m.
Oh, 5 p.m. Okay. Oh, that's good. So we're not too
No, this is fine.
out of sync.
No. Except this is Tuesday. And
Yes,
it's
okay.
your Wednesday, right?
Yes, yeah. So it's 12:15 on Wednesday where we are.
Yeah.
I mean, 10 o'clock was good if that suits you. To do the same, to start again at the same time.
Okay,
Does
let me
that
figure
suit
out.
you?
So 10 o'clock would be
About 3 o'clock your time? 3 p.m. So 10 a.m. our time would be 3 p.m. your time. If it's 5 there now.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you figured this out. Let me see. So how about Friday for that? Does that work for you?
Give me 1 second. I just need to go and check my calendar.
Yeah,
I'll be back with you in a minute.
that's fine.
I have nothing planned on Friday. It's a public holiday here, so that actually works well for us.
Okay. It's recording.